There comes a point in your life when failure stops being the thing you fear most. You already know how to survive it. You know how to recover, regroup, work harder, find another way, and begin again. You've done it before, and probably more than once. But then something unfamiliar happens. Things start working. The opportunity arrives. The right people start paying attention. Your work gains traction, and you find yourself invited into rooms you once only imagined from a distance. The vision you've been carrying starts taking shape in front of you. And instead of feeling only excitement, you hesitate. You slow down and second guess yourself, distracted by things that did not matter yesterday. You might even catch yourself pulling away from the very thing that you said that you wanted. It isn't fear that it will fail. It's the dawning suspicion that it might actually work. And if it works, your life may have to change. You may have to change, or you may simply have to stop living as the version of yourself who learned to survive without it. Welcome back to your Passion, Purpose, and Personal Brand. I'm Lisa McGuire, Strategic Identity Advisor and creator of the category of Only. We're nearing the end of the Identity Evolution series, and today's conversation is about something that holds far more people back than most of us are willing to admit. I call it fear of expansion. And I originally had planned to call this episode Fear of Success, but I don't think success is what frightens us. Success is just evidence that something is working. Expansion is what success asks us to hold. More visibility, more responsibility, more opportunity, more influence, expectation, more truth. And often, if you want to get to the core, it asks us to hold a more honest expression of who we really are. Gay Hendricks is one of the first 3 guests I chose to interview when I launched the show. You can go back and hear him in episode 4. He wrote about what he calls the upper limit problem in his book, The Big Leap. He talks about the way we sabotage our own success the moment we move beyond the level of love, abundance, visibility, or fulfillment that we're used to holding. I've watched it happen in my own life and in the lives of my clients. Capable people who reach a ceiling they've never encountered before and mistake the discomfort of expansion for proof that something has gone wrong. But discomfort doesn't always mean that you're on the wrong path. Sometimes it just means that your old identity has reached the edge of what it knows how to contain. Expansion isn't about becoming someone else. It's about refusing to keep negotiating with the person who you've already outgrown. In the last episode, we talked about nervous system regulation, about what happens when the body knows something before the mind is ready to admit it, and how dysregulation can make everything feel more urgent and dangerous than it actually already is. That conversation matters here, because expansion often registers as danger to a nervous system that equates safety with the familiar. Your current life may not be fulfilling, but it's known. Your current role may no longer fit, but you understand the rules. Your current visibility may be too small for your contribution, but you know exactly how to function inside of it. Expansion introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty raises questions most of us don't say out loud. What if success requires me to become someone no one wants to be around? What if people think I've changed? And what if they're right? What if my growth reshapes my relationships and the people who love me now don't know how to relate to who I'm becoming? What if success leaves me alone or I outgrow the rooms I once belonged to? What if people start expecting more from me than I'm ready to give? What if I can't sustain what I build or the opportunity grows larger than my capacity? What if success asks for something I'm not willing or ready to give up? And maybe the most unsettling question of all, what if I'm becoming everything I said I wanted, only to discover that my old life can no longer hold me. These aren't questions about ambition. They're questions about identity, belonging, safety, worthiness, love, and whether we trust ourselves enough to stay connected to who we are while our lives grow larger. Fear of expansion rarely announces itself as fear. More often, it shows up as procrastination. You know, the proposal that sits ready while you wait another week to send it. You know the price needs to go up, but you keep finding reasons to delay. An invitation arrives that you immediately start listing reasons why you're not ready. You get close to launching the idea and suddenly decide the branding needs more work. You refine something that was already good enough. You overprepare, undercharge, retreat. You get unusually tired. You pick a fight with someone you love, or you create chaos in a part of life that had been stable. Sometimes you get obsessed with solving a smaller problem so you don't have to face the larger opportunity. Or you stay busy doing things you already know how to do because competence feels safer than expansion. It's easier to stay impressive inside of a familiar identity than to become a beginner inside of a larger one. I'm going to say that one more time. It's easier to stay impressive inside a familiar identity than to become a beginner inside of a larger one. Sometimes fear of expansion even sounds responsible. Have you ever said this to yourself? I'm just being thoughtful. I need more information. I should wait until the timing is right. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Or I'm trying to be realistic. And sometimes those statements are true. Discernment matters. Timing matters. Capacity matters. But there's a real difference between discernment and self-protection. Discernment asks whether something is aligned. Self-protection asks whether you can avoid being changed by it. For much of my life, I preferred to work behind the curtain. And it wasn't because I lacked confidence. I loved the work. Behind the curtain, I could move faster without a decision by committee, an endless debate on whether an idea was too bold, or waiting for people to catch up with what I could already see. I could hold that big picture, do the research, make the connections, and see the winning outcome before we took the first step, and then build towards it. That's how I'm designed. I create, I resolve, I build, I recognize patterns before other people have words for them. And I often see the future version of something while everyone else is still looking at the raw materials. Long before I became known for helping founders, executives, and leaders recognize their identity and their category of only, I helped build a school from the first cornerstone up. It wasn't without opposition. There were people who questioned what we were doing and obstacles and resistance that would have made it easier to dilute the vision. But opposition usually made my resolve stronger because I could see something that other people could not yet see. I'd watch a parent walk through the doors with a 5-year-old arriving for kindergarten readiness testing. Everyone else saw a child that age, but I saw 13 years into the future that same child as a young adult walking proudly across the stage in a cap and gown, excited to chase whatever came next. I could see who they might become, the gifts and talents and natural brilliance already waiting inside of them. And I believe that with the right environment, they'd grow into themselves. We didn't have to manufacture their potential. It was already there. Our job was to recognize it and protect it, to nurture it and create the conditions where it could emerge. Looking back, I can see I was learning to architect transformation before anyone else could see it. And that's what I still do today. Only now, many of the people walking through the door are adults who spent years becoming capable, accomplished, responsible, and successful. They've built businesses, careers, teams, communities, families. But somewhere along the way, they lost touch with the person they were before the world told them who it would be most convenient for them to become. I helped them recognize what's always been there, acknowledge what got them this far, and see what they were designed to do. I helped them build a future self that isn't fabricated from pressure, but revealed from truth. But there was a limit to staying behind the curtain. The people who needed what I offered could not find me there. For a long time, I believed that good work would speak for itself, that if I built something meaningful enough, the right people would eventually discover it. But excellence doesn't introduce itself. People do. And at some point, I had to admit that staying behind the scenes was no longer neutral. It had become a decision, one that had protected my comfort, but limited my contribution. Then someone reached out. They told me something that I'd shared had given them hope. It was hope that their life could be better, that they didn't have to settle any longer, that wanting to follow their heart and do the work they love didn't make them selfish or irresponsible. My words helped them believe they weren't doing life wrong. I remember realizing this could no longer be about myself. No matter how much I wanted to back away or go quiet, someone out there needed me to show up and say what they needed to hear that day, needed to be reminded that they were already an amazing human being who didn't have to earn the right to want more, who could build a life greater of meaning by learning to love themselves again. That moment changed my relationship with visibility. I didn't become visible because I stopped feeling fear. I became visible because the mission got louder than the fear, because someone else's hope mattered more than my comfort, and because staying hidden had become more painful than being seen. That's one of the real turning points of expansion. The moment visibility stops being about attention and becomes an act of stewardship. The moment you understand your voice isn't only yours. Your story may hold language someone else has been waiting years to hear. Your work may be the doorway someone needs to walk through. Your willingness to become more fully yourself may give someone else the permission to stop abandoning who they are. That doesn't mean you owe the world constant access to you, that you sacrifice your health, your boundaries, or your humanity, or that more visibility is automatically better. It means that once you know you're called to contribute, you can't keep using humility as a hiding place, or pretend that staying unseen is automatically more noble than being seen. Sometimes staying small isn't humility, it's fear wearing socially acceptable clothing. And sometimes the most selfless act of serving others starts with what feels like the most selfish one, following what's true for you, becoming fully yourself, choosing the work that makes you come alive, listening to the passion that refuses to leave you alone. Because when you can truly be yourself, you become available for your full expression, and your greatest contribution isn't generated by performance. It's generated by presence. People can feel the difference between someone trying to impress them and someone standing in what's true. Presence carries an authority performance can never reproduce. Not dominance, not certainty about everything, but congruence, where your thoughts, voice, body, decisions, and work all tell the same story. When you become fully present as yourself, you help other people remember themselves. Now, today's episode is sponsored by Architect Her, and one of the reasons I said yes to being part of this work is that it aligns so deeply with what I've spent my life believing. Architects can see possibility before the finished structure exists. They stand on open ground and imagine what could rise there, understanding that a meaningful structure isn't built by accident. It requires vision, discernment, courage, and the willingness to make decisions in service of a future other people may not yet be able to see. Architect Her is a private leadership architecture experience for high-capacity women ready to rise into their next level of leadership and help architect what we call the new human economy. It's not another line on an already impressive resume. It's about becoming the woman capable of carrying a larger contribution, the one who can see what the next era of leadership requires, who can recognize who she is within it and step forward with the clarity, authority, and humanity to help build it. If you know you're no longer here simply to succeed inside systems that already exist, but to help architect what comes next, you can learn more about Architecture through the link in today's show notes. The next era of leadership needs women who are willing to see the architecture and then become the architect. There's something else worth acknowledging about expansion. It doesn't only bring opportunity, it brings pressure. When you claim your difference, name your category of only, and stop sounding like everyone else to stand in the contribution that belongs to you, life tends to get bigger. Not necessarily easier, just bigger. More people pay attention. More may be expected of you. Your decisions may carry more weight. The room may go quiet when you speak. And you may find yourself holding influence you once wished someone else would carry. The identity that got you here may not know how to hold that. This is where a lot of people start negotiating. They tell themselves they'll step forward once they feel fully prepared, once the fear disappears, once everyone understands, once no one will be disappointed, once success can be guaranteed not to alter their relationships. But that moment never comes because every expansion changes the shape of your life. The goal was never to prevent change. It's to grow into a self that can actually hold what you've built. And this is where compassion matters. The version of you that stayed hidden wasn't weak. The version who overworked wasn't broken. The version who settled, performed, pleased, controlled, proved, or stayed quiet was trying to protect something. Your belonging, your safety, your relationships, your identity, and maybe even the inner child still living inside you, the one who learned that being easy, useful, quiet, impressive, or undemanding was the safest way to stay loved. We don't shame that version of ourselves. We thank them. We acknowledge the intelligence of what they learned and honor how far they carried us. They don't have to disappear. They don't have to lead every decision anymore. And when you build your future self, you don't erase the person who brought you here. You bring them with you, not as the architect of what comes next, but as someone worthy of your tenderness. They got you this far. They deserve gratitude, and maybe they deserve to rest too. Fear of expansion tends to soften once we stop treating our past selves as obstacles. You aren't at war with who you were. You're becoming capable of holding more than they had the capacity to hold. And that's not betrayal. It's continuation. The child who needed protection can grow into the adult who creates safety. The person who needed approval can learn to offer themselves belonging. The person who worked behind the curtain can become visible without losing the gift that made them such a powerful builder. I didn't stop being an architect when I stepped in front of the work. I simply let people see who had been building all along. Maybe that's what expansion is, asking of you too, not to abandon your gifts, trade your humanity for a bigger platform, or get louder just to be noticed, but to become visible enough for the people who need your work to actually recognize you. So what ceiling are you standing beneath right now? What's begun working that you keep trying to interrupt? Where are you still asking permission to become someone you already know you are? What opportunity have you written off as bad timing simply because it requires a bigger identity? And which of those reasons are real versus inherited stories about what successful people become? Maybe you believe success makes people selfish or unavailable, disconnected, or even hard. Maybe you've watched someone gain influence and lose their humanity, and you're afraid of becoming someone no one wants to be around. That fear deserves real examination, but there's no rule that says expansion requires self-abandonment. You don't have to become less human to become more influential. You don't have to sacrifice every relationship to honor your calling, or turn yourself into someone inaccessible, performative, or consumed by achievement. You're allowed to define what success looks like, build in a way that preserves your humanity, and rise without severing your connection to yourself. In fact, I believe the future depends on people who can do exactly that. Hold influence without making themselves superior. Carry responsibility without turning into machines. Create wealth without letting it become their worth. Lead without losing tenderness. And build something meaningful while staying deeply human. That's expansion with integrity, where more isn't about volume. It's about capacity for contribution, for truth, freedom, for responsibility toward the gifts you've been given, for living in full expression. I want to be clear about this. This is not the final destination. There's no finished version of you waiting at the top of the mountain. Only another level, another invitation, and another chance to live as more of who you already are. This is the journey forward towards what's possible when you live as your legendary self. Not a perfected self, not one that never doubts or stops needing rest, support, and reassurance, but the person who stays willing to answer the call. The one who knows fear can come along for the ride, but it doesn't get to choose the destination. The one who understands that expansion isn't proof you've arrived. It's evidence that life is asking you to participate more fully. And there's one more truth worth sitting with. Every expansion has a cost. Not always the cost people assume, and it may not require losing everything you love, but it will require releasing something, an old definition, an old role, an old room, an old belonging structure, an old success strategy, an identity that once served you but can no longer lead you forward to where you're being called to go. That's where we're headed next. In the next episode, we're exploring something I call identity compression. What happens when you've outgrown the life you've built, but parts of you are still trying to squeeze back into a version of yourself that no longer fits? Why do we make ourselves smaller to stay familiar, compressing our gifts, our voice, our leadership, and even our dreams just to fit in rooms we've already outgrown? And how do we start expanding again without abandoning ourselves in the process? I don't think most people live beneath their potential for lack of talent. I think they've simply learned somewhere along the way to make themselves smaller than they were ever designed to be. We'll start unpacking that next time. And then, over the final 2 episodes of this series, we'll explore what hidden friction is really trying to teach us, and ultimately, the art of becoming. Because becoming was never about adding more to yourself, fixing yourself, or turning into someone else. It's about remembering who you were before fear, before proving, before performance, before the world handed you a script that was more convenient for everyone else than it was true for you. Until then, notice where you've reached a ceiling you've never touched before. Instead of assuming the discomfort means you should retreat, consider whether it might be evidence that you're being invited to expand. Expansion was never asking you to become someone else. It has always been asking you to stop negotiating with the person you've already outgrown. Thanks for joining me here today. I'll see you here next time.